Hey everybody, welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and my goodness, there has been a lot of spoilers in the last couple of days. I was not around Friday or Thursday, so we've got like 20, 30 to go through. It's going to be kind of crazy. There's a lot of different things that have happened, including a release of the two additional mechanics that are going to be in the Fall of Argenport, Inspire and Spellcraft. And we'll be talking about each of those as we get to those cards. But both of them look like really, really good mechanics that basically really just use the digital space very well. They're going to be very, very solid options for basically a lot of the things that we want to be doing in the list. And looking at how the set's filling out, it looks like there's going to be a lot of internal synergy that's going to be very, very fun for us. So I'm excited to see all of these cards as they are finishing up, but we've actually got like a huge portion of the set spoiled. It's kind of looking like the release is going to happen on like Tuesday or Wednesday from how fast the cards are being spoiled, which would be great because then I get about 2 days to play before I head off on a vacation type setup. I've got a Wi-Fi hotspot set up, which will hopefully allow me to stream a little bit, but yeah, we're just trying to get videos together and make sure that we have plenty of content for you guys when that happens. Regardless, at the moment, we're going to go over more cards from Fall of Argenport, starting with this one from LSV's stream, which was literally like 2 or 4 hours ago, something like that. It was not that far off. Anyways, yeah, so this is Big Brother, an 8/8 that can't attack or block that when you summon it plays 2 1/1 Little Brothers, and when a Little Brother hits the enemy player, you silence the Big Brother, which of course is actually good for you because the Big Brother's ability prevents him from attacking or blocking. So a 5-cost 8/8 is kind of a tricky setup, and let's go ahead and look at that Little Brother as soon as I find the image, because they're everywhere. When Little Brothers damage units, they stun that unit, so they're 1-cost 1/1s that are tokens. They can't be generated naturally. You can't put them into your deck, but they nonetheless can do some damage. So this is a giant Yeti sort of back and forth type thing going on. There's a lot of things to break down here, but overall, like, the card is kind of unusual as far as Yeti cards go. Like, it's not really designed to make a lot of interesting Yeti synergy happen. There are some interesting things that it can do, specifically if you're playing with Wump and you play a 5-cost 8/8, it immediately plays 2 Little Brothers. The 2 Little Brothers throw their snowballs at the opponent's face. That means that they deal damage to the opponent's face, and you now have an 8/8 that is free to attack or block as you like. So you've created essentially a 10/10 worth of stats for 5, which is your ideal situation, especially since the 1/1s are both 2/2s now due to Wump. So yeah, like, Wump party starter as always, just making Yetis better, so that might be a thing that actually happens. And we'll see if Little Brothers have other ways to actually make that work. Little Brothers also can be used as like mild control options. They play okay in weird icebreaker strategies where you want to try and stun enemy units to kill them. Like, if you're playing with icebreakers and you are attacking with Little Brothers, then the decision to block Little Brothers becomes much, much more difficult. I would say overall, like, that's going to be kind of fascinating. They work with cards like Icebow to stun enemy units. They work with Caldera Channeler to get your Big Brother back. So yeah, there's a lot of maybe available options as to what you're going to do. I would say this card is actually like really, really hard to make a functional card overall. Like, with Wump, it's very, very easy, but if you don't have the right combo of cards, then Big Brother doesn't come out as anything playable, and the Little Brothers don't really do anything either. So you really have to have the deck built around this legendary to make it work. But if you do, then yeah, this is like a huge sort of beefy dude that gives you a ton of stats on the board and gives you a lot of different threats for your opponent to deal with, along with a couple of Yetis. Like, there's maybe some potential for this card to be played. Overall, though, it's just a little bit tricky. It's going to be kind of hard to run. Take that swig of water that I forgot to take before I started the video, and we'll move right on to the next one. But yeah, as legendaries go, this isn't like my favorite type, but it's certainly unusual build around and could do some cool things. Okay, let's talk about Spellcraft a little bit, because there are quite a few Spellcraft cards out there. I think we're going to lead with Gleaming Shield, since that one is, well, yeah, that image is kind of a little bit weird, but... So, we have a new mechanic. It's called Spellcraft. And it is specifically a kicker for weapons. So if you are playing a weapon, then you have the option to pay the spellcraft cost to play a spell of some kind in addition to the weapon. So for example, this gleaming shield here, which I'm pointing in the wrong direction, this gleaming shield here plays as a 5-cost card. Here, let me just this is actually a thing that should be happening anyway, so this gleaming shield here. Okay. That's what I'm looking for. This gleaming shield here, because when I'm looking at the card, I want to be looking at the... Anyways. Yeah, so this gives you an Aegis and also a +1/+3 bonus, which, as far as weapons go, is pretty okay in a limited format style. Like, you do get to basically just get yourself a weapon that prevents your opponent from removing the unit without spending 2 cards. That kind of benefit is usually really, really good because it means that you are never going to lose out value. You're always going to force your opponent to use at least 2 options to get rid of the card. And in limited in particular, where they can't just like levitate or snowball or Vara's favor, and they usually won't have like all of the necessary cards to just pop that Aegis right off, this is kind of awesome stuff. But the spellcraft here is that you play the Mirror Image, which is a 3-cost spell that you can pay for 2 in this one, and will just make a copy of the unit that you're playing. And here's the thing. The Gleaming Shield's summon ability gives the wielder Aegis. The Gleaming Shield itself does not have Aegis, unlike Shielded Short Barrel. So if you play Gleaming Shield, this guy will get Aegis, and if you play it with the Spellcraft bonus, you'll get an Aegis unit with a copy of itself that doesn't have the shield, but still has the Aegis. So you'll have 2 units with Aegis that are, in other words, just like doing kind of ridiculous stuff. Like, so if you put this on a 4/4, then you'll have a 5/7 Aegis and a 4/4 Aegis just for paying 7. That's kind of crazy in a limited format. It's also actually not all that terrible in certain ranked formats. Like, you may be able to do some cool things with like a 7-cost mirror image that happens to play like multiple copies of a thing and give the thing Aegis. Like, that is like up there in strength of the pack terms. It's not gonna be an amazing setup, but yeah, it does maybe do some interesting things. And all of the Spellcraft cards have these kind of interesting interactions with each other where they are doing like a number of different useful things to basically support their own weapon and also to potentially give the weapon extra value that can help you out in other ways. And it's true that the Mirror Image does not have to go onto the wielder of the weapon. It is a spell. You can play it on anything that you like, and you can basically just set it up however you want to. The other thing that's really interesting about the Spellcraft mechanic is that from a perspective of like what it is that you want to do with your decks, very often you want to run a specific number of units and then a specific number of non-weapon, non-spell units, or a number of weapons or spells. And oftentimes you'll have to trend pretty heavily towards weapons or spells in order to get yourself into a situation where you can take advantage of cards that benefit from having weapons or cards that benefit from having spells. Specifically, there's quite a few cards out there that actually care about you having a certain number of spells in your void. These cards allow you to play weapons and still have like extra spells that are being generated, so you can put spells into your void and you can fulfill those particular requirements a lot more easily. So in terms of like draft and limited, that's really, really interesting, and it also just gives you some really fascinating options as far as what it is that you want to do with the card. Playing a 1/3 Aegis by itself is actually not all that unreasonable in limited, and this is reasonably strong. At 7, this card is kind of a limited bomb and could do some really kind of ridiculous things. So yeah, there's some potential for this card. I don't think that it's going to be a ranked staple or anything, but it's pretty interesting. Another fun one on that same note is Horrifying Helm, which is slightly the inverse of what the other one is doing. This is a very, very cheap weapon that plays Scare, the 2-cost spell that flips your opponent's or flips a unit's strength and health. And we'll just show that real quick. Swap a unit strength and health as a spell. It's a 2-cost, and yeah, you can pay 3 on the Horrifying Helm to play Scare. So Horrifying Helm This is a lot to break down. This thing actually is just kind of weirdly, insanely flexible in a lot of ways that you would not expect. Like, as a 0/3, you can play it, and then you can knock out your opponent's 0 attack units, which is kind of useful if you are using some sort of interesting trick to reduce your opponent's attack. You can also use it to swap health and strength on cards that you have that you particularly want to have reversed health and strength. You can use it on the unit that has the Horrifying Helm to make it basically just a really, really super aggressive unit, which is very handy if you're running something like a Berserk Elf. So the 2-cost 3/1 Elf with Berserk with a Horrifying Helm is now a 6/1 Elf with Berserk and can kind of get, well, actually, never mind. It gets to be a 3/4 health elf with Berserk. But like if you're playing this on like sort of aggressive Berserk cards or defensive Berserk cards, they become very aggressive Berserk cards. You can use it to kill blockers in weird ways. You can use it to pop Aegises. Like, there's just a lot of weird ways that this might actually work out for you, just being able to play like a little bit of extra health on something and also being able to play it as an offensive card. So that flexibility is really fascinating. Like, what you would normally say about this card is that it is a Worn Shield attached to a Scare, neither of which are particularly good cards on their own. But the ability to play both of them at once, and to play them in a way that is really mutually beneficial, could be actually kind of okay. Like, you can do some cool things with it, and like there's just a lot of potential for shenanigans. Like, if you consider the complex board states that this creates, Horrifying Helm will always have interesting choices that it can generate for you that could do kind of interesting things. Like, I think in Limited, this card is actually kind of bananas. Like, it actually does do some really interesting things to the board, and you'll always be able to use it in some fundamentally helpful way. It's not a bomb, but it is a fairly useful removal card / card that can actually get your units across for better damage. It swaps out the strength and health of units that are really awkwardly statted, which is very, very fun, and it is just like really, really good at like basically messing with your opponent's strategies, dealing with cards that are otherwise very, very scary. Like, this thing kills Dune Phantoms, obviously, and anything else that has 0 attack. You can kill Shield Mans. You can make things torchable. You can do just utterly ridiculous shenanigans. And, like, yeah, overall, like, this card is just a huge toolkit in Limited. And I'd actually say that you would probably pick it somewhere in the middle. So seems pretty reasonable, and just a really good example of how fascinating Spellcraft can get as far as, like, I would say this is the most complex of the Spellcraft cards. It's not the best of the Spellcraft cards, but it's a pretty decent one. Alright, for like a more standard demonstration of what Spellcraft does, Welding Torch is a 3/2 for 4 that at Spellcraft of 3 plays a torch. So, like, straight off, this is like a 7-cost torch plus a 3/2 weapon. That's, you know, not going to be amazing for you, but even so, you do get a torch out of it, and that is something that you want to do to kill something. So giving your units a buff plus giving the ability killing something of your opponents could actually be okay. Like, I'd say, once again, this is stronger in Limited than it is in Ranked, but Spellcraft cards in general are going to be very, very powerful in Limited for that particular reason. So yeah, this is this one's a little bit expensive. But another thing that this actually shows off is how this can be, how you can benefit from basically reducing the cost of these weapons. Like, if you are using a Welding Torch, then you can set this thing and do some, like you can basically, like, reduce the cost of this with like Crimson Firemaw, get it down to 0, and then for 3 pay a torch to end a Welding Torch at the same time. Like, there's a lot of interesting things that you can actually do with it. Yeah, like, this is not quite Ancient Defenses levels of good, because Ancient Defenses is something that actually costs 4 and gives you something good, but like, this is something that you could actually see, I could actually see you playing a couple of in a Limited format. Here's a really fun one, Alchemist's Concoction. Spellcraft, pay 4 to play Alchemical Blast, the 3-cost colorless card that deals 2 damage to your opponent's units, or to your opponent's face, as far as things go. So this one's a little bit cheaper if you want to do some type of torch effect, which makes it a much better Limited card, as it's just like a 5-cost removal card that also gives you a minor benefit in the random battle skill. The random battle skill is a summon effect, so if you can find ways to recur Alchemist's Concoction, then you can actually give yourself multiple random battle skills and do some interesting recursion options. This is fascinating with mirror image effects, with Hero of the People, with other kind of weird stuff. I don't think the card is particularly strong, and as a colorless card, it should not be, but it's kind of interesting and could lead to some interesting shenanigans if you find the right combo for it. I really look forward to trying to figure out some ways to recur Alchemist's Concoction over and over again, but like paying 5 to basically just get some kind of interesting benefit and also kill a small unit in draft is actually kind of reasonable. So yeah, could be another really, really fun one. Spellcraft seems like a pretty well designed limited format bonus, and so we're going to be seeing a lot of those cards in particular. All right, any other Spellcraft cards here? Magus of Celerity, Alchemist's Concoction. I think we're good. Oh, no, we got one more. This one's actually quite solid. Vanquishers Blade. 2/2, cards can't leave the enemy void, and Spellcraft 3, play a Vanquish. This is the first of the weapons that we have seen with Spellcraft that actually is playable in ranked. Like, this is a Crown Watch Longsword, which is okay, and then the Spellcraft ability on it, the Vanquish, is actually quite strong, because this basically gives you 5 cost, you get a beneficial effect, you get a Vanquish that kills one of your opponent's big units, and you get the kind of like nice stat bonus on whatever your Aegis unit that you want to play this on. Like, this is pretty good on like a Crown Watch Paladin, or a Silverwing Familiar, or anything along those lines. Like, this is just like a card that you can stick down to just murder something very easily, hate on it in the void, and then still have like an Aegis unit that's going to be like fairly solid in terms of defense. Like, yeah, this one is absolutely a draft bomb, and in terms of limited, I think this one actually has a decent amount of play just for the ability to shut down the enemy void and to do some other cool things. Okay, we got one more. This is probably the most exciting of the batch. Sword of Unity. Okay, 4 cost, Combre colors, Lifesteal and Overwhelm, and Spellcraft 2, play Stand Together. So that's a lot, right? Stand Together is the 3 cost Time and Justice that gives you +1/+1 to each of your units and gives each of your units Aegis. So for 6, this card will give your unit +3/+3, Lifesteal, Overwhelm, and Aegis, and it'll give every other unit a +1/+1 and an Aegis as well. However, the Stand Together will trigger, your opponent will have a chance to respond to it and kill certain things, so you want to do this on a turn where your opponent is basically not doing anything. Sword of Unity is brutal. If you play this on a turn where your opponent doesn't have any power up, it can end the game, especially if they're playing some sort of control-heavy setup. Lifesteal and Overwhelm together, pretty dang good. The Aegis ability on top of that, yeah, that's kind of nuts. This is like capable of turning cards into just bananas shenanigans. Like, you could put this on something like a Hero of the People and get 3 different skills out of it, but you can also just put this on like your Awakened student and blow out your opponent for 6 in a good way. If you want to run 8 Stand Togethers, this is definitely a good way to do it. And like, 4 cost +2/+2 Lifesteal and Overwhelm by itself doesn't actually feel that bad on an Aegis unit like Copperhall Elite or something along those lines. Like, you can definitely do some interesting shenanigans with that. Yeah. Like, I would say that this one sees some limited play. It is a little hard to play. The 6 cost is somewhat difficult, but like, if you're playing this on a really big unit, you're very happy, and if you're playing this at 6, I'd say you're extremely happy, especially if it's on a Sandstorm Titan or a Champion of Progress. Certainly, yeah, anything big that doesn't have skills really likes Sword of Unity, and anything that does have skills probably is okay with having a Sword of Unity in the first place. So yeah, this is kind of the nuts Spellcrafty Stand Together setup that you could actually go with. Okay. We're going to split this video, I think, in 2. So, YouTube folks, we're going to talk about Inspire next, and I will see you guys there.